Good morning, it's Miss Moore here with Wednesday's maths lesson, and today we are learning to find fractions of numbers and shapes. That's going to link to all the work that we've been doing this week. Now, we're going to quickly recap fractions and then I'm going to set you off on your work today. So, just remember, half is where you are splitting something into two equal parts. It's really important that it's two parts and they are both equal. And you can see that here. And then quarter is when we are splitting something into four equal parts. Now, have a think. Where might you see fractions around your house? So pause the video, maybe you want to have a quick look, see if you can see any, and then come back. And then, where might you be using fractions most days and not actually realise that you're using fractions? So let's have a think. Okay, so I use fractions every day, and it was only when I was planning this that I thought, wait, I hadn't realised that I use fractions every day. I use them in my kitchen an awful lot, and I'd never really thought about it. So in a minute, I'm going to transport you into my kitchen, and you're going to see some of the things that I've found to do with fractions in my kitchen. Okay, so are we ready? Okay, so I've got some toast for my breakfast this morning and I want to see how I could cut it into halves. So I've got two slices of toast to do this with. So let's think about how could I cut this piece in half first. Well, I could cut it straight across the toast or I could cut it straight down the middle. So let's do that. So I could cut it straight across the middle there. Then what about a different way? How could I cut my jam toast in half that's in a different way? Oh, I could go diagonally. Straight across. So there we are, there's my first slice of toast cut in half, and there's my second slice of toast cut in half. What if this time I wanted to cut it into quarters? How could I change my bread so that it's cut into quarters? How could I turn that half into quarters? Well done if you said you could cut each of those halves in half. Okay, so I cut each of my halves in half so that now I've got 4 quarters, and I did the same here. I cut my half in half so that now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters. There are different ways that you could cut toast to find quarters. So I've been doing some baking and I've made 12 fairy cakes. Now I need to decorate them. And I want half that are covered with chocolate and half covered with icing. So how many of each am I going to need to decorate? So pause the video and see if you can figure it out, and then come back and see if I've worked it out correctly. So I've coated my cupcakes, so I've got half that are covered with icing and half that are covered with chocolate. So that's half of 12 is 6, so I've got 6 of each. So I've done some work on halves. Now I could carry on doing some learning and I could use quarters this time, because I happen to have 4 different toppings to go onto my cupcakes and I want a quarter covered with each. So I wonder how many cakes will I decorate with each of the toppings. I've now decorated all of my cakes, and luckily my tray is set out like an array, so I could see that there were 4 groups. So I've got 1 quarter covered with stars, 1 quarter I've put some cherries on, 1 quarter with coconut, and 1 quarter with rainbow sprinkles. So quarter of 12 is 3. I wonder what other fractions I could find in my kitchen. Okay, now you're back and you've seen me using fractions for cutting toast. Maybe you could have a go at cutting some toast into halves and quarters. Maybe you could make sandwiches and cut them into halves and quarters in different ways. I made some cakes. Maybe if you're lucky enough to have a mummy or a daddy at home that does baking, maybe you could join in and make some cakes. But if not, another way that we could investigate fractions today is that I'm going to make a pizza. I could use Play-Doh to make my pizza, I could make a real pizza, or I could make a paper pizza. So the children in school won't be able to make a real pizza, unfortunately, in the classroom. So we're going to be making paper pizzas. Can you cover half of the pizza with tomatoes? So again, you could make them using Play-Doh, you could colour them in, and then could you cover half with green peppers? Then, what about quarters? Which topping would go on each quarter? So I'm really looking forward to seeing some photos of how you found fractions in your house, what you're going to be doing with fractions, maybe sandwiches or toast, maybe you've got some Play-Doh out, maybe you could do some fractions with your Lego, maybe you could make a house out of Lego that's half red, half blue, maybe quarter of the roof is green, quarter of the roof is yellow, quarter is another colour and quarter is another colour. Maybe you could have a go at making a Play-Doh pizza, a real pizza or a paper pizza. Really looking forward to seeing what you do today for your work on fractions. So please, please, please send in your photos.